Welcome back to the Quirky Inquiry. Today we're talking about Note-Taking Basics, episode number 2, which is going to concentrate itself upon fact-based learning. So there's a clear distinction, not exactly a clear distinction, but they're distinct enough as to require different note-taking strategies. Last week we talked about experience-based learning, of sympathetic learning, of absorbing yourself into the tale of the characters and learning through the experiences of the characters in the novel. Now, that takes a drastically different way of taking notes to make sense of those texts. Whereas fact-based learning that we're going to talk about today deals itself with harder stuff, so to speak, more concrete stuff that you can hold in your hands. So we're talking about statistics, we're talking about social studies, we're talking about psychology books, we're talking about history books. We're talking about books such as the French Revolution, for example, a textbook on the French Revolution. We're talking about the books on spirodynamics. We're talking about books, for example, Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, Sigmund Freud's on the psychology of love and the interpretation of dreams, Charles Darwin's a treatise on the evolutionary. I don't exactly remember what Charles Darwin's book was called. It's on the shelf. Oh, on the origins of species. That is the sort of books that we're talking about here. Those are the sort of books that requires just drastically different measures. They just require brand new things to consider. They require everything else that you've learned from school or didn't pick up from school. Today we're going to do a recap. Today we're going to, gear you up towards taking better notes from those sort of books, from those sort of fact-based, very hard fact-based books, full of statistics, full of stuff, and full of other stuff. We're going to talk about it in a whole shebang. So there's this first thing that we have to talk about, which is you have to really understand that as you read a fact-based book, you're not exactly trying to memorize everything. So I've talked about this before. There's the silly image out there of if you memorize a bunch of facts, you can recite all the facts, then you are the most well-read. Then you are king. Then you are the top of the hierarchy. Then you are some sort of a guy that's got a lot of stuff jammed into his brain. Now here's the truth. Although you can repetitively repeat information and, put it in your head into your long-term memory if you repeat it and rehearse it to yourself enough, there's a distinction between, in psychological studies, elaborative rehearsal and maintenance rehearsal. So maintenance rehearsal is when you repeat it over and over and over again, then it gets encoded into your long-term memory. Whereas elaborative rehearsal is the act of understanding a concept so deeply that it connects with your worldview in your head, that it connects with everything else in your head, that it begins to connect with, life situations, begins to connect with every other books that you've read, and then this piece of knowledge becomes yours. Okay, whereas maintenance rehearsal, you can get 50 flashcards and mark them up, 1789 in July. The States General and third estate members weren't happy, so they gathered together to form the National Assembly, and that basically kicked off the entirety of the French Revolution. So I can recite that piece of fact. It's in my head there somewhere, but that's rehearsed into the long-term memory through maintenance rehearsal. If you don't understand the other aspects of the French Revolution, that piece of fact, if you try to jam it into your long-term memory, it wouldn't make much sense. It wouldn't exactly give you that whole conceptual understanding. So elaborative rehearsal, on the other hand, if you understand, the causes, what happened before 1789, what happened before the National Assembly was formed, what happened before every one of these silly stuff began to happen, what happened before such matters began, you're going to have a much more complex understanding. You're going to have a much more conceptual understanding. So therefore, if I trigger one node in this entire map of understanding, then you are able to effortlessly just come up with dates, theories, key figures, who wrote that treatise, who was the president of the National Assembly, who are the people that caused the uproars, and who are the people that are responsible for putting an end to the uproar. Who is that guy with a large jaw that decided to cut everybody's heads off? Once you have this complex understanding, one node in your conceptual frame, if I trigger one date, one person, one key event, it's going to scatter into a map where this map right now, you get to pull different inferences, pull different characters, and pull different historical references into this cohesive understanding. And this understanding goes beyond memorization, goes beyond what is testable at school. It transforms really the way of looking at the world, if you think about it. It's quite fascinating how it works. So the holy grail of fact-based learning, the holy grail of trying to learn these things is to get to the point where you can start to construct this cohesive conceptual map in your head. So you're not memorizing stuff, you're not understanding things on the surface, but you're going deeper. You're understanding it, you're having it as a part of your worldview. And to reach that place, and to reach that sort of cohesive understanding, we have to talk about how to take effective notes, how to mark up your textbooks, how to exactly create this entire map in your head, how exactly to trust yourself in the process of note-taking, how to distinguish useless junk, useless filler, from things that actually are going to enhance your understanding. Because there's just too much information out there. It's impossible to memorize everything, but there are key things. They're analogous to linchpins that holds the rest of the operation together. So we're going to talk about how exactly to get all of it out. So today I'm going to use an example actually from school, 12th grade history course. So it's quite a demanding subject. It's one of those subjects that if you don't know how to tackle it, you're going to be wallowing in pain. If you don't know how to tackle history conceptually, you're going to really struggle to come up with strong points to arguing your essay. So this is my process of taking notes. This is my process of, finding stuff from books that are important enough to be encoded into my head. And also, I don't have a rote memory. That's just I'm just terrible at rote memory. There's no way I can memorize anything through rote memory. So over time, I developed this conceptual way of organizing knowledge in my head. So firstly, the first thing first, when it comes down to a fact-based book, is that you have to do what's called an inspectional reading upon a certain chapter, upon a certain key theory, or upon a certain individual, if it's a biography. First step to every fact-based learning thing or books, you have to do what's called an inspectional reading. So inspectional reading, for example, a history chapter, maybe it's talking about revolutionary ideas and how Enlightenment thinkers came to contribute to the overall French Revolution in its totality. So first thing that you do is that you do such a broad survey of the chapters, because within each big chapters of whatever book that you decide to tackle, there are sub-chapters. There are sub-headings, and there are sub-information that are organized into little chunks. So what you do, instead of reading into the weeds, instead of upon a first time reading trying to pick up everything you could, because that's just going to overwhelm you for the amount of information that you're overcame with. Instead of nibbling on every little detail and getting yourself really overwhelmed, read the entire damn thing really fast. This entire chapter probably would have taken me 5 minutes to weave through, just once. Know what happened, know exactly what popped up in your head, and know exactly what to look for. Upon your first inspectional reading, it's helpful to highlight certain stuff that just jumps out at you like a lightning bolt. So when I read something, for example, the works of Spirit of Laws, there's one quoting here. So there's this one key quoting here. If the despot entrusted his state to someone else, or even several people. So when something lights up in the paragraph, once something just captures your eye, it's really an intuitive judgment. I can't teach you how exactly to do it. Teachers couldn't exactly tell you how to do it. Different people have different focuses. Some people focus on the individuals. Some people focus on the hard facts. Some people are sensitive to different types of information out there. So you have to weave through on your first inspectional reading to find these aha or lightning bolt moments. And upon your first inspectional reading, I want you to highlight only the things that triggered like a lightning bolt, only the things that sent you off into the stream of thought, and only the things that really stuck out to you. Okay, that's inspectional reading. Should take you less than 10 minutes to weave through, for example, a 20-paged, or is it 20-paged? 15 to 20 pages. Very broad survey. Should take you less than from 5 minutes to 7 minutes of a 20 pages treatise. And then only highlight and make notes, little notes, a couple of words, a little phrase, on the things that jumped out at you the most. Broad inspection, look at what jumped out to you, because those things that jumped out at you are now the anchor points that you're going to anchor rest of the trivial information upon. So to create that sort of mapping effect, that conceptual understanding effect, you need backbones and these points of references. Inspectional reading, after that's done, second time is what we would call analytical reading. So analytical reading is really, once you have, think of it as scouting, for example. I haven't done much scouting myself because I'm a nerd. I stay in my room 24/7 reading books about scouting whilst having not done a lot of scouting myself. But as scouts, the scout doesn't just go out there and to note every details there are. He first has to get this general sense of what the landscape looks like. Is the landscape undulated? Is it flat? Is it caved in by mountains? Does it have water? Does it have a stream? So the scout has to get a general understanding of the scape. He has to memorize certain key features of the scape before he can memorize, the type of grass species or the type of tree species, the type of animal species. He has to know what the terrain looks like before he can, know all the little trivia. Inspectional reading is the first stage of scouting, of you anchoring things, highlighting things, creating these little backbone of anchors for you then to go back second time reading, analytical reading, to really get into the weeds, to really create these cohesive connections, to really put yourself out there as to construct a Prometheus. If you have the skeleton, the rest of the thing is pretty darn intuitive. Second time reading, something magical is going to happen. Something just it's very hard to explain, and here's where the satisfaction of learning comes in. If you have anchored in your backbones, first time reading, second time you get in there, you try to read for little details, and what's going to start to happen is that these little details, they're going to get spontaneously just assembled together with the things that jumped out at you when you read a book. When you inspect through this entire thing, when you have the backbone, little trivia, the trivial details tend to congeal themselves upon this backbone that you have. And it's really beautiful how this works. They're little details that you wouldn't otherwise able to memorize. Now they've all began to make sense. Now the dates actually mean something. Now you have this conceptual understanding in your head, then you can start to connect, for example, at the end of the American Revolution to the start of the French Revolution. All these intricate connections began to be built. At this step, at the step where these interesting things start to congeal together, when they begin to make a lot of sense, when you think to yourself, wow, these little trivia, they're not really trivias at all. They're all part of a cohesive whole, and I can see that. Had I established that backbone in inspectional reading. So thereby, as you have all those shenanigans going on in your brain, as you have all this stuff buzzing around in your head, you're getting all excited, here's the moment that you go to your computer, go to your commonplace book, create a new document, and then to take notes in a flow fashion. So start with the thing that you've highlighted. So the subtitle, the overall title is going to be the thing that you've highlighted, or on your inspectional reading. So lay out the skeleton, for example. How did the revolution start? Whom are the individuals that are responsible for the start? And then to lay out a general backbone as you're taking notes. And then follow your thought processes. Under each big headings, jot down all the connections that you've made. Jot down all the pieces of trivia per se. To jot down all those trivia as to give you a visual representation of the stuff attaching itself upon the already established backbone through inspectional reading. So if you take your notes correctly, if you do this flow order, backbone, skeleton, inspection or reading, and then you attach these trivias to certain backbones, that's how you develop that conceptual understanding. That's how you trigger one node in the entire network, in the entire system, and to be able to recall information just on a shot of a whim. Recall information upon, if a person talks about one thing, you can just recall everything there is about the French Revolution. And that, from that place, certain trivia wouldn't really matter. You might get a few dates wrong here and there because it's conceptual. But then the satisfaction that you get from this form of learning, from not just blindly committing everything to your memory, it's so much more satisfying. It's just so much more rewarding to learn in that fashion, in which I really would can urge you guys to try it out. Really would recommend you guys to give this technique a shot. So therefore, you take notes in a fashion of laying out the backbone, attaching trivia, and then doing everything that way. And then next thing you know, notes are no longer things that you refer back to. Notes are now a piece of representation of your internal thought processes. And if in the future you tend to forget, you read one part of that note, the entire thing is going to make sense again. You read one little piece of the puzzle, the rest of the puzzle is going to show itself. And that's, how you keep a commonplace book when you read difficult texts about history, about philosophy, about anything. Inspection or reading, lay out the backbones, attach trivia then to the backbone, and then take notes to directly reflect your mental process. So pour your mental process out on the page. At last here, just a disclaimer. This technique here wouldn't work for everyone. It's just an alternative way of learning. It's just something that I've figured out along the way, given that I'm terrible at rote memory. I need a different way to learn. So therefore, this is my different sort of pet technique to learn history, to learn from philosophy books, to learn from really difficult sociological texts, to weave through all these information, and to really get to the core of self-education itself. To not memorize, but to let knowledge, conceptual knowledge, transform how we view the world. Try it out. If it doesn't work, don't listen to me. If it works, keep it. Now, I think that is it for this week. Hope you guys enjoyed and taken something of value away from this video. And Robin here from the Quirky Inquiry, signing off right about now.